Oh, God, I'm loud. I got the 4 a.m. flight from London, so I'm going to be a little bit slower than usual today. I'm Andrew Tindall. I lead thought leadership and global partnerships at System 1, who has already been talked about, so I don't need to introduce us. We're the marketing effectiveness platform. Today I'm going to be sharing some amazing research on the power of creativity and emotion in radio advertising that we've done with Radio Centre's UK amazing database. But first of all, I wanted to share a little cartoon because I talk to a lot of marketers, and you don't often hear radio is kind of like even thought about all of the time. It's this, they have no idea that it's broad reach or incredibly trust building or incredibly affordable, which is a real shame. So I'm super glad to be in a room filled with people wanting to talk about radio and the amazing work Kieran's doing over in Ireland with Radio Centre. I mean, even when I was working at Diageo, my media team would never bring a radio onto the plan, which is such a shame. But it's great to be in Ireland, as I said, because in Ireland, marketers love radio. Like, it's insane. I don't know what it is. It's probably like a cultural piece here that you could probably write a book on. Not going to do that, but it's also smart because the consumers, Irish people, spend a lot of time with radio as well. And then, I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to put on some click-through rates to prove a point, because, click-through rates are normally shit. But this proves a really good point about how people also underestimate the power of radio and how it also builds across channels and it has a multiplicative power. There's a great kind of geolocation study which showed that when radio and then radio and out of home was turned on, you saw more click-through and meta ads. So radio's a really powerful medium that layers on top of other mediums. And that's why I'm going to be talking about how to make better radio ads today. And there's one other reason that I'm going to be talking about radio ads, and that's why I'm going to play a video.
It's just a tickle. I'll try a sweet.
It's just a wee tickle.
Could be just.
Let's talk about this.
Did somebody take your teeth?
Did someone say just eat?
It's about justice for 11 million people.
Why is this mad man showing TV research at a radio conference? That's the amazing Earning Attention by Thinkbox and ITV, and it shows something really interesting. Well, they filmed a load of people watching ads in their lounges over COVID, really creepy. But what they proved through ethnographic research, would be the technical term, would be that 70% of TV ads aren't paid with full visual attention. Audio is way more powerful beyond just radio. So understanding how to do it is incredibly powerful, because also you're 20% more likely to recall the audio from a TV ad than the visuals. So audio is incredibly powerful, all because of this real powerful human insight. You can't close your ears. So what is Listen Up and what I'm going to be sharing? It's essentially research where we've answered how do you make the most effective audio ads, which can be applied to radio or digital audio or even TV, as I've just shown there. How did we put together this this research? And I've just reminded, I've got a colleague who is also on a cancelled flight who will be coming with a case of Listen Ups, the real deal, printed, that we'll be doing a signing in the Wetherspoons around the corner after. Do you have Wetherspoons here? I don't know. You do? Okay, you do. I don't know, whatever. Look, so we have books. So what was Listen Up? We've brought 3 lenses together for the very first time. The first lens is the incredible radio gauge data from Radio Centre UK, where they measure the in-market effects of radio campaigns, and they've been doing this for over 10 years now. So you can see what effects on consumers those radio campaigns are actually having. What we then did is layer over the System 1 testing data, where we tested all those campaigns for the branded emotional response to understand how those campaigns are making people feel. And then we were able to look at what does that do in terms of in-market effects. Similar to what the IPA data we were talking about earlier, it's just another way of getting to what's happening in market. And then for the very first time as well, we've brought left and right brain audio creative features to life. So I'll get more into that, although I'm slower than usual, so maybe I won't, but we'll get there. We'll try to get there. So let me explain about these 3 layers of data. System 1 testing is essentially based on the principle, well, actually, everyone's talked about it so far, and the more you feel, the more you buy. We measure the emotional response to audio advertising second by second, and we also measure the branded response to audio advertising. When did people recognize what brand an ad was for? We do this with 150 consumers around the world, including Irish consumers. We've tested a few Irish radio ads that we're going to hear today, and we turn these into creative effectiveness metrics that explain the power of that creative. So irrelevant of media plan, but what does that creative, that piece of advertising have the potential to do in market? And we've got 3 metrics that hopefully are now famous if I'm doing my job correctly. Star rating predicts the long-term effects of advertising based on how positive you're left feeling after being exposed to advertising. Spike rating is incredible because it measures and predicts how likely a piece of creative is going to be at capturing in-market demand, so those short-term effects. It's a blend of emotional intensity, not positivity, but engagement, just getting someone to feel anything, and also how quickly you manage to brand in an ad. Because if you brand quickly, you speak to those people who are already in market. You speak to the half-interested. Salesmanship, as it's being called already today. And then fluency rating is really interesting. It's going to be important because it leads to a key finding in this study. It's the percentage of correct brand attribution after being exposed to advertising. And System 1 tests a load of ads globally now, TV, radio, digital, out of home, and audio often has a bit of a fluency issue. People seem almost scared to brand. It's weird. What about the second layer of data, that radio gauge data from Radio Center's 10 years of work with, with thousands of brands. I've done this with over 1,000 large brands now, where it's essentially like if anyone's done a brand lift before, it's like an exposed, non-exposed study where they look at various metrics, advertising awareness, consumer action, ad recall, brand trust gain, this kind of stuff. And it's very simple, so you just measure the lift between whether they were exposed to the radio campaign or not. And as I said, very robust study, 10 years, 13 different categories, lots of campaigns here, lots of data, very robust, believe me, trust me, lots of data. And then what we did in the research was we then could essentially split them by the emotional metrics to understand what you can do with your creative would then lead to in-market effects. And I'm going to share the first 5 findings with you, but I'm going to leave you with the full publication, and then maybe my colleague Beth gets here on the plane and there's a case of books hanging around if you want one. And I added a picture of me doing a similar talk in London. I don't know why. I needed a picture. So the first finding is radio ads that leave listeners feeling more positive drastically change behavior. So in the radio gauge data, you can see claimed behavior change, whether people have gone and done something, bought a brand, searched for a brand, talked about a brand, visited a shop, downloaded their app, and then we split the data by our star rating, whether people were left feeling more positive or not. And we can see that for the campaigns where people weren't, so below average star rating, those campaigns that didn't leave people feeling very positive, there was little behavior change in the campaigns. Incredibly, the campaigns that had higher average star rating, so those that left people feeling more positive, those happiness and surprise emotions, led to drastically different behavior change. And I've seen this in research with out of home and digital now. If you want your ad to work and be remembered and shift kind of ad recall, branding it heavily and getting someone to feel anything, engagement is useful. But if you want to build those long-term effects and change behavior, it's about leaving people feeling positive because that taps into that System 1 pathway. So yeah, a big key finding. And then here's one of the strongest radio ads we've tested in Ireland today, which is a really good example of this.
Mom, how many beans would you say are in a can of Heinz beans?
Oh, I don't know. About 100.
465 on average.
Wow. So how many are on your plate there?
Well, I'd say about 200, but now about 160.
Heinz Means Meals beans are back. And with every purchase, Heinz will make a donation to Bernardo's Breakfast Clubs, supporting vulnerable families. Pick up a limited edition 3-pack in your local supermarket or visit bernardos.ie/donate.
The fonts are all over the shop today on my slides. I'm normally better than this as well, guys. Sorry. We normally have a custom font. Well, look, why does that do so well? Why does that create such positive emotions, as you can see on that second-by-second emotional trace? The lazy answer would be purpose, because they had a purpose message in there. That's not true. We'll get onto it. It's essentially what you call right-brained. You're not being sold at, you're being entertained. There's characters there. There's a mum and her son. There's dialogue. There's a certain depth to the audio that draws you in. It's entertaining. It's not being rationally sold at you, as we heard from our first speaker today as well. But I'll get on to why I think that's more powerful a little bit later. But now we'll go on to our second finding. We also found that when you look at the specific types of behavior change, we looked at what might drive fame. So word of mouth and sharing on social. So consumers talking about a brand essentially digitally on person after being exposed to a radio ad. Not talking about a radio ad, that would be insane. No one talks to their friends about a radio ad. But talking about a brand. And we saw the same thing. We saw that if radio campaigns left people feeling more positive, you would literally go and talk about that brand more. Interestingly, if radio campaigns left you feeling more negative here, you get a decreased effect in posting about it online. So you really, again, if you want to be building fame, you want to be leaving radio listeners feeling more positive. And that's because it makes your media spend work 5 times, that would be insane, 5% harder. So let me explain this a little bit. The radio gauge data is incredible because they also track the media spend. So all the data you see in this study as well is media weighted per 100 GRP. So you can actually isolate the effect of the creative. What we also did with the data is you can track whether someone thinks they heard an ad a little bit or a lot. So if you media weight that data, you can look at whether someone thinks they heard an ad a lot despite the same media spend. And we found that ads that left people feeling more positive, higher than average star ratings, they felt like they'd heard the ad more, despite it not being true. What you could call claimed heavy ad exposure. So you're literally getting like free frequency because of your creative being stronger, which I think is really powerful. So here's another example. I've been cheeky here. It's not an Irish one, but it's my favorite one from the UK, and you'll see why.
Oh, afternoon, Caesar.
Good afternoon. How are you getting on with my glorious city?
Well, it's all finished, Gov.
What?
Yeah, it's all done. I've built the Colosseum, the aqueduct, the lot.
You've built Rome? In a day?
Yes.
You're pulling my leg.
No.
Ah, you must have had your Weetabix this morning.
Oh, I did, Gov. 3 of them. Now, there's still some grouting to do in your Roman baths, but I'll have that done by the end of the day.
Have you had your Weetabix?
So do we all know what an Essex builder is? Yeah? There's an Essex builder in that, right? There's a cultural reference. When I was talking about being entertaining, showmanship before, that's like it times like dialed up to the nth degree. That's like a brilliant piece of work. There's humor coming out there. There's a clear sense of place and real depth and characters, which is why I think that's so powerful. And we actually saw 11% behavior change caused by that campaign in market, which is mental for such a huge brand like Weetabix. Peter Field has talked about before the incredible trust-building power of radio, and I'm completely sold that to build brand trust, it's actually an output of media choices, not creativity, which seems mad coming from a guy who works at an agency that talks about creativity. But it's true. He's shown with the IPA data that campaigns that have more radio in them compared to campaigns that don't lead to more brand trust gains. So how do you maximize this was our question in the research. And we lean on our fluency rating there, that percentage correct brand attribution. We saw that if brands with higher than average fluency ratings, so those that were linked stronger to their advertising, so you could recall the brand correctly after seeing the ad, led to double the trust gains in market. And that's purely because if a brand is present more on radio, you get all those great effects of the media. You get those signaling effects of radio, how trustful it is. That's because people really trust radio, and it's why you often see people rating the news coming from radio as their most trusted source versus other things like digital. This is crucial because digital is terrible at building trust because everyone thinks, you just kind of get fed these horrible messages. And then our fourth and penultimate finding is the most complicated, so buckle up. So what we've got on the x-axis is the change in ad awareness. So whether consumers thought they had heard so not ad recall for a specific radio ad, but advertising from that brand in general. And we've weighted it again for media weight, 100 radio GRPs to remove the media effects. On the right, we've got our spike rating, which is emotional intensity and speed of branding from that piece of creative. You can see that if you create more emotions in general, just any engagement, it just happens to be positive, and if you brand earlier, so higher spike, you get more ad recall changes per pound you spend on your radio ad, which is incredible. And I sent it to someone and they said, you should really remove the outlier that's showing ad recalls going backwards. And I refused because that's the most interesting point. So salience, ad recall, brand equity, memory structures get eroded by time and your competition advertising. So if you're not building all those good bits, branded memory structures, quicker than they get eroded, you're going backwards. That ad was so boring and so poorly branded that every pound you spent on it, you were moving your ad recall backwards. You should have put money on a different campaign that was interesting and well branded. It's really important that, sure, radio advertising, if you really want to build trust from your radio, make it branded. If you want to build your ad recall and get more top of mind, make it interesting and branded as well. And then if you want to change long-term behavior, lean into advertising that's interesting to build those positive emotions. I'm going to skip this next one.
Hello.
Just because I'm running out of time. And we can see that here, we've now tested a load of UK and Irish radio ads actually, and the average doesn't change. I just didn't update the slide on the 5 a.m. flight over or whatever. But the brand building power of radio in long term, so average star rating, is the same for radio and TV. We can see that the ability for radio to build positive emotions that create long-term brand equity and long-term effectiveness is very similar in all our testing. And we've tested a lot of campaigns now at System 1. And now in a tremendous 3 minutes, I'm going to explain a very complex topic, which is left and right brain thinking, to wrap us up. So very quickly, we've got two ways of looking at the world. Our left hemisphere is essentially more sensitive to dopamine. And this is the work of our Chief Innovation Officer, Orlando Wood. If you want to know more about this, go look for his books, Lemon and Lookout with the IPA. Our left hemisphere is more sensitive to dopamine, which is a reward for completing a task. That's why we're all scrolling on TikTok and vaping these days, because we're all plugged into our dopamine, our very left brain. We've shown that creative features that speak to this goal-orientated salesmanship, people who are in the buying mode, are more associated with our left hemisphere. Our right hemisphere is more sensitive to chemicals like noradrenaline, which is a reward for keeping vigilance on the world. So you hold a broad vigilance with your right hemisphere. If something attracts your attention, you essentially pass it over to your left hemisphere to complete a task. So right-brained advertising entertains and attracts your broad attention, and then it passes it over to the left brain to then complete the task. So for long-term brand building, if you want to speak to people who aren't already interested in your brand, you need to create right-brained advertising, entertaining advertising. For the very first time, we've brought this to radio, and I'd like to quickly share the results with you. dramatic intimacy. The fermata, this sheet music symbol, was used by Beethoven in his Fifth Symphony to create pauses. Pauses draw our broad attention. We also heard the use of sotto voce, which is, I'm butchering that because I'm northern. It's Italian for under the voice. Mozart used this as well in, actually, this is a scanning we took from his last piece of music he wrote, Ave Verum Corpus it was called, which essentially means lowering under the strings. Beethoven and Mozart were the world's best storytellers without the need for visuals or even words. And that's where we've drawn inspiration from for our first ever right-brained creative feature for audio advertising, dramatic intimacy. You hear this a lot in great ads. They're not shouting at you, they're taking their time, they're whispering, they're even creating pauses as well. It draws your attention. Some other right-brained creative features that we've found that work for audio advertising to attract and sustain broad attention is characters, story, and a sense of place like you hear in, similarly to TV advertising. We also see dialogue, especially with distinctive accents in audio advertising work because they establish characters and the roles between them. Unexpected contextual noise, sounds of the living, playing with words, especially humour, which you've already heard about today, is another other key features because they add depth to a scene. And finally, music with melody is another right-brain creative features. So these are the 10 creative features that we've outlined in Listen Up, which attract and sustain broad attention to build long-term brands rather than just selling to those already interested, which are drastically different to left-brain creative features in audio advertising. These are just suited for delivering messages, unilateral communication, facts, figures, repetition. And if you don't believe me, well, you're going to love this next chart. So our final finding for the day is we looked at, for all the campaigns that we measured, whether they contained these 20 features or not, these left or right brain features. And we then modeled, again, media weighting, whether if the presence of a feature affected ad recall in market, so whether they built more memory structures in market. And then on the y-axis, I'm going to share with you whether they affected star ratings, so whether they could build positive emotion or not. Incredibly, the presence of the right brain features are a lot more associated with building emotion and memory. So their presence lifted the star rating, more positive emotions, and they also improved ad recall. They build positive branded memory structures for your brands because they attract and speak to new audiences. That's great for long-term brand building. Very, very different to what you hear most radio ads these days, which are just kind of, like I often cycle past a car in London, and like I feel sorry for the guy sat in the front because there's just someone shouting at him on the speaker, like, buy my shit, please. So right brain advertising, build more of these features in if you want to build long-term brands with your radio ads. We haven't got time for a Specsavers ad. It's brilliant. This thing's beeping at me. You can scan this and get the full research for free. Or if my colleague comes, we've got some books for you as well. But really thank you for your time and great to be here. Thank you.